Yeah, can you tell me the idea and the concept with you against Andy Kaufman? Who made the phone call? Who came up with the concept and the feud between you and Kaufman?
Jimmy Hart told us that, but okay.
Well, he actually, believe me, you'll get a different story here. Jimmy Hart, somehow Jimmy Hart thinks he was a lot more involved than he was. But you could pretty much get the story from watching the movie with Jim Carrey, Man on the Moon, and that sort of thing. The whole thing was Andy Kaufman's idea, and he actually approached Vince McMahon in New York first, and went to him with the idea of him wrestling in front of a wrestling crowd. Andy had been doing the thing where he'd been wrestling women at his nightclubs and those comedy appearances, and it was really, people had come there to see Andy do jokes or do comedy, and they weren't really buying the wrestling thing. But he was so into the wrestling and such a big wrestling fan. He went to Vince McMahon Sr. at the time and told him what he'd like to do. He said, I just want to wrestle in front of a crowd that came to see wrestling. And the ironic thing was Vince Sr. told him, he said, I like you, Andy, and all this kind of stuff, but he said, our fans are so skeptical, and he said, I'm just fear that if we involve an actor with wrestling, that it'll put a bad light, and the people will think, oh, well, they're just all acting and everything. So he kind of turned Andy down. Fortunately for me, there was a friend of mine named Bill Apter, who was a wrestling magazine editor at the time, and he was there in New York. He overheard the conversation. He went to Andy Kaufman. He said, hey, I got a good friend named Jerry Lawler down in Memphis, Tennessee, and he has a territory down there, and why don't I call him and put you in touch with him? And he said, I think he would be excited about the idea. And it all grew out of the fact that all Andy wanted to do, really, he didn't have any intention of wrestling a man or me or anything. He just wanted to wrestle women in front of a wrestling crowd. And so we brought him down to Memphis, and he did it. Came in about 4 times just wrestling the women, and it sort of evolved. And finally I went to Andy one day and I said, man, why don't you and I have a match? Look, we're selling out this place every week. You wrestling women. Imagine what we'll do if you wrestle me. And he said, oh, I can't wrestle you. And I said, trust me, it'll work. And it did.
Only the second move by Lawler.